Hello everyone. Salam, Namaste, Adab, and welcome to today's event. Today is going to be a very interesting talk, a brief history of the present Muslims in New India. Speaker is Dr. Hilal Ahmed from Center for the Study of Developing Societies, CSDS in New Delhi. I think other two are also associated with the same center, but Professor Manindra Nath Thakur is from JNU and Dhananjay Rai from Gujarat Central University. Nonetheless, they both are collaborating with the CSDS on Lok Niti and other, and have written common articles, joint articles. Dr. Dhananjay Rai is going to formally introduce both speakers. So I would rather introduce Dr. Dhananjay Rai briefly. He is, I think, is a very sharp, young, still young, not so young, but very good political scientist, I'll say. His interest is on political philosophy. A lot of articles are on Gandhiji, Gandhian thoughts, and some very interesting articles on. I couldn't figure out about Gandhiji and film. There is one article on that, but his basic background is in the political science and political philosophy and Gandhian thoughts. He is going to introduce Dr. Hilal Ahmed and also Dr. Manindra Nath Thakur, who is going to give the concluding remarks. So welcome you all. And now welcome Dr. Dhananjay Rai. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I am grateful to the Indian diaspora in Washington, D.C. for this opportunity for learning and participation. The speaker for today's program is Professor Hilal Ahmed, an associate professor at the Center for the Study of Developing Society, Delhi. His books, Muslim Political Discourse in Post-Colonial India, Monuments, Memory, Contestation, Routledge 2014, Allah Naam Ki Siyasat, Setu Prakashan 2023, Siyasi Muslim, A Story of Political Islam in India, Penguin 2019, and co-authored Democratic Accommodation Minorities in Contemporary India, Bloomsbury 2019, and co-authored Democratic Accommodation Minority in Contemporary India, of course, explore an interdisciplinary approach to study Muslim politics and explain the discursively constituted nature of contemporary Muslim political discourse in India. In addition to these, he has also co-edited Companion to Indian Democracy, Resilience, Fragility, Ambivalence, Routledge 2021, and Rethinking Muslim Personal Law, Issues, Debate and Reform, Routledge 2022, and Sudipto Kaviraj, a reader, Hindi, Setu Prakashan 2023. Professor Ahmed, who has been a visiting professor at several institutions, a recipient of several awards, and the maker of films like Beacon of Hope and Kutub Ek Adhura Afsana, is widely known for his work on Indian politics and Indian Islam and is a regular columnist in several newspapers. Professor Manindra Nath Thakur teaches at Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Having taught for 2 decades at the University of Delhi, honored with the Fellowship for Innovation Research at the Developing Countries Research Center, University of Delhi, as a former fellow at the Nehru Museum Library, and establishing the Creative Theory Group and founder and trustee of the Foundation for Creative Social Research. He is known for his work on New Religious Movement, Indian intellectual traditions, the Social Healing Project, which promotes conflict resolution and inter-community dialogue. Among his notable work, an edited volume titled Wounded History, Religion, Conflict, Psyche, and Social Healing offers argument for secularism from an Indian perspective. Another edited volume explored the limits and democratic potential of anti-corruption movement in India. His recent book, Gyan Ki Rajniti, Bharati Chintan aur Samaj Adhyayan, has become a popular work, a book for urging the meaningful dialogue between social sciences and Indian philosophy. A very popular public intellectual and columnist, he has also been a teacher and inspiration for many generations of students, including Professor Ahmed and myself. Welcome, sir. Professor Manindranath Thakur will give concluding remarks. Professor Ahmed's talk today becomes highly significant in the context of his constant engagement with issues since last 2 decades. In Ahmed's writing, we witness the distinct pattern of writing and illustration, which offers you generous analysis like synthesis between local and universal, attention towards South Asian Islam, the role of charitable state in social justice and Pasmanda questions, state as the initiator of several categories, myths and facts of Muslim unity and electoral behavior, heterogeneity and homogeneity of Muslim questions, looking at Muslims sociologically, not only politically, linkages between religion and philosophy, role of colonialism on understanding of Islam, keen interest to know Indian Islam through personalities, and reading politics as a multi-layered phenomenon. According to Dr. Ahmed, to understand Muslim politics and electoral politics, one must pay attention to the constitution, in the identity, social justice, the myth of Muslim as a vote bank, participation in the movement, globalization and localization of Islam, and the diversity of violence. In the background on three problems in his own words concerning an excessive focus on the constitution, while negating the role of market and institution, discarding the role of ideology, and the lack of political imagination for the future, and Muslimness as a vantage point, we look forward to his talk on a brief history of the present Muslims in New India, which is also the title of his forthcoming book from Penguin in 2024. Over to you, Professor Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dhananjay. And I am glad that you mentioned that Professor Thakur is our teacher. And this, what I am going to do today is not merely to present the work of an individual, but rather is a collective project in which I, along with Professor Thakur, Dhananjay, Nazima, Professor Sutwa Kaviraj, Yogendra Yadav, many of our colleagues and friends have been participating. In fact, we had a discussion today in this morning about the idea of conservatism. So therefore, what I am going to do today is basically to introduce my book, which is not merely my book, but it's a collective project. I am really grateful to Indian Diaspora, Washington, D.C., for giving us this opportunity. It's a collective thing, and that's why Professor Thakur and Dhananjay, we are making a set of presentation. It is actually a collective presentation, and taking away from the conventional ways in which a speaker is asked to answer a question, I would encourage all the participants to make it a participatory event so that it should not become Man Ki Baat. Basically, what I am going to do with the time which is allotted to me, I think it's 35 minutes. So I'll read out a text, but before that, I would like to clarify what what the purpose of this presentation is all about. I'm going to do four things. First, I'll introduce the structure of the book and the main argument which I am going to make in this book, which is coming out in July. And this is the very first presentation about the book. Second is that I would like to clarify what the purpose is. The purpose is to go beyond the given narratives of Hindutva's triumph and Muslim victimhood, because we are conditioned, and so much conditioned in such a way that we think of a binary. And for a serious political analysis, this is my contention, that we must get rid of the binaries and try to make things and analyze things in a proper perspective. So therefore, I'm trying to offer a kind of a framework which is to take myself away as an individual researcher and try to make an argument so that we can have an informed discussion about the nature of Muslim engagement with politics at the moment in contemporary India. Now, that's the second thing. The third thing which I am going to do is to talk about the technique which I am going to use. I have used in this book. And the technique is that I am not merely interested in what is given to us. Rather, I would like to engage with the structure that produce certain narratives and the ways in which politics is played out. So it's the study of the structure which are there, which are actually there and getting consolidated, not the statement which is made. So we have to make a distinction between the statement that is made and the source of that statement. I'm interested in the source and how these sources are going to create and how they are going to use different sources in order to make certain ideas acceptable in our public life. And finally, I'm interested in the idea of intellectual politics. What do I mean by intellectual politics? Is basically that I have a location as an academic. I am not a political leader. I do not claim to represent any community or any group for that matter. But at the same time, this is my profession. So therefore, I have to clarify what kind of politics I'm involved in. There are three facets of this intellectual politics, which I'm going to highlight in the text which I have prepared. First is that I would like to make a principal distance from the communities on which I work. Secondly, I am actually trying to explain the process by which research is done in this book. And finally, the tentativeness of my argument. And these three aspects makes me an academic who is interested in doing intellectual politics. So this is all about the presentation. I will read the text and I'll finish in 30 to 33 minutes. And then I would like to give more time to Professor Thakur to make his comment, and then we should have some kind of a formal discussion. So as I said that this presentation, this text is divided into basically three sections. I'll start with an event, and this event is very recent. A railway protection force, RPF constable, killed 4 innocent people, his senior officer, 3 passengers, on 31st July 2023. They all were traveling in the Jaipur-Mumbai Central Superfast Express. 2 of the passengers were identified as Asghar Abbas Ali and Abdul Qadir Muhammad Hussain. According to media report, the accused constable was heard saying, and I quote, पाकिस्तान से ऑपरेट हुए ये और मीडिया यही कवरेज दिखाता रहा है, उनको सबको पता चल रहा है ये क्या कर रहे हैं, अगर वोट देना है, अगर हिंदुस्तान में रहना है, तो मैं कहता हूं मोदी और योगी हैं, ये दो ही हैं. And I translate is like that. They are being operated from Pakistan, meaning Muslims are operating from Pakistan. Our media is also showing this. They know what they are doing. I say if they want to live in Hindustan and if they want to vote, Modi and Yogi are the only option. This is a highly disturbing event. It underlines the fact that anti-Muslim discourse has reached to an extreme violent level. The established marker of Muslim presence, skull cap, beard, hijab, minarets of mosque, and even an advertisement written in Urdu, are being perceived as civilizational threat for Hinduism. Muslims are targeted, abused, insulted, and even lynched to death in public to assert nationalism in overtly Hindu terms. It does not stop here. A section of media further contributes to this hostile anti-Muslim environment. An impression is created that Muslims are responsible for each and every problem of the country. They are untrustworthy, their loyalty for the nation is questionable, they are highly organized, they are involved in conspiracy against India and Hindus, and their religion permits them for getting involved in anti-India propaganda. A leading news anchor, in fact, prepares a flowchart to explain the nature of jihad in India. This aggressive anti-Muslim environment upsets me deeply. It goes against the two principles I always cherish: my spiritual faith in Almighty Allah and my belief in the Gandhian ideal of Sarva Dharam Sambhav. I find it hard to think only as a Muslim, as if this is the only identity attributes I have. I follow a liberative interpretation of Islam that encourages me to offer namaz and observe fast without giving up my commitment to larger issues of social justice and economic equality. In this sense, I am more than a Muslim. This more than a Muslim identity, however, goes against the established political correctness. Hindutva politics categorize Muslim as a monolithic religious group in order to substantiate Hindu homogeneity. The self-claimed liberals, on the other hand, claim to protect Muslims as a religious minority to defend Indian democracy, if not secularism. In both cases, Muslim identity is envisioned as one-dimensional phenomenon. The outcome is obvious. In last 5 years, I have been politely advised by well-meaning acquaintances to change the topic of my lecture or talks simply to deal with the pressure from outside. At the same time, I am also asked by the vocal section of netizen to be thankful to Hindus that they have tolerated me in India. According to these Twitter nationalists, I survive on taxpayer money. So what went wrong? I belong to a generation that grew up in the 1990s. That is when so many versions of India of today began to take shape, including Hindutva India and the politics of social justice and equality. We forcefully rejected the Hindu-Muslim divide, histories of partition, English dominance of urban elite, caste-based prejudices, patriarchal values, and gender injustice. We cherished these values without being apologetic about our religion and caste identity and class location. This moral political imagination of the 1990s was different from the nation building project of Nehruvian elite of 1960s. There was a radical impulse, a commitment to create a just and egalitarian society. In this creative radical context, it was possible to think of a liberative, pro-people and secular interpretation of Islam and Hinduism, something that Azhar Ali Engineer and Swami Agnivesh conceptualized and practiced. This political imagination, however, suffered from two internal problems. First, it did not pay attention to the idea of comprehensive socio-political transformation and reduced the radical impulse to electoral calculations. The so-called coalition of Dalit Muslim backward was nothing but an electoral game plan used and nurtured by the political elite who tend to describe themselves as secularist. The moral decline of political parties and subsequent transformation of many people's movement into funded NGOs paved the way for a strange political correctness, an imagination of a fragile secular network of progressive and deprived section, Muslim, Dalit, women, Adivasi, worker, page and displaced communities, people with disability, and so on. There was an internal contradiction in this conception. These segments of society were seen as inherently progressive and secular. This assumption was so strong that there was virtually no discussion on the composition of this progressive secular camp and its power elite. There was a fear that critical questioning might disturb the equilibrium of this network and would strengthen what was then called communal regressive forces. So that was the first problem. The second problem was related to the tendency to view some section as inherently progressive meant that rest were adversaries. That meant viewing the North Indian Hindi-speaking upper caste religiously practicing Hindu male as responsible for social backwardness, institutional exclusion, and communal prejudices against the other. It was a fertile ground for Hindutva politics. It was easier for them to raise the question of nationalism as well as the marginalization of Hindu religious identity in the public sphere. In this volatile political context, something else happened. Muslims were given the status of a recognized permanent national minority under the National Commission for Minorities Act 1993. In a way, this official move transformed Hindus as national religious majority for the first time in independent India. The outcome of these processes became evident in post-2014 India when the older 1990s discourse of inclusion is replaced by a powerful assertion of Hindu victimhood. This is what I have tried to do in this book. Now I come to the second part of the presentation, And the subtitle which I given to this is Political Correctness and Public Debate. I begin with a WhatsApp message which I received from a well-meaning intellectual. And it says, I'm going to read out the message. For an intellectual who is not dependent on income generated by clickbait articles, what explains the need to write so frequently? If you want to pose as a public intellectual, you need to clarify whose interests are being advocated and protected by your writing. If it is purely academic illumination, then write well-researched and well-considered peer-reviewed article in academic journal, not these dozens of articles every month, unquote. I received this message on a WhatsApp group. And this individual was a bit upset with me because according to him or her, I write unnecessarily nuanced and academic oriented article in newspapers and web portals on regular basis. Obviously, this person is unaware of my academic writing, both in Hindi and English. I do not want him or her to read my CV, nor I am interested in defending my public writings. Yet, I am persuaded to respond to this ill-informed, unkind, and completely reactionary comment because it is based on an assumption that public discussion are only meant for simple, straightforward, and ready-to-use answers. It reminds us that a dividing line is often created between nuanced, jargon-oriented academic discourse and easy-to-understand journalistic type of writing. This dividing line has been one of the main reasons behind our deteriorating level of intellectual engagement. A section of public commentators, those who frequently contribute to newspapers and web portals, remain indifferent towards serious academic work. This apathy makes their explanation shallow and superficial. The academics, on the other hand, fail to understand the significance of contemporary questions. They're always late in responding to social issues which set the contours of our public life. Let me elaborate this puzzle by highlighting three intrinsic problems of our public debates. First, there is a belief that constitution is a permanent reference point for determining the everyday business of political life. And we must remember that constitution is actually worshipped in India as if that as a sacred document on the one hand by the Hindutva and as a self-explanatory text by the liberal. And I find this attitude problematic. It is true that there are certain normative ideals which have been established by the Constitution for providing guiding principles to the government. It does not, however, mean that the practicalities of politics are always determined by these principles. The political class interpret these principles as per its own requirement and produced effective meanings. For example, the Constitution was interpreted as a source to justify the state's intervention in the economic life of the country. The public sector, planning, socialistic pattern had been the keywords for our public discourse in the 60s and 70s. The Constitution, however, given a completely different interpretation after economic liberalization. The state now claims that the market is capable of regulating itself, hence, there is no need to intervene in the economic domain. The market-driven economic policies, in a way, have restructured the political institution in a radical manner in last 3 decades. Establishment of SEZ and the introduction of GST are not merely simple economic initiatives. They have far-reaching impact on local institutions as well as the federal relations. Our public debates, unfortunately, do not recognize such complex and direct interconnection between economy and politics. Consequently, a rigid interpretation of political institution continue to survive. This brings us to the second related problem. It is now fashionable to claim that there is no place for ideology in our politics. And this is precisely what Ram Madhav argues today when he described BJP as a conservative party, not as a rightist party. The Aam Aadmi Party was instrumental in propagating this claim that ideology was a 20th century phenomena that had no real role to play in Indian politics. It was also argued that good practices would generate good ideas, which might form the basis for new political values and standards. In the post-ideological world, this formulation was deeply attractive, especially in the early 2010s. However, it had a very different practical implication. Political parties no longer need to offer any ideological justification for electoral maneuvering and manipulation. They defend their practical moves in the name of winnability. Even the BJP, which proudly celebrates its association with the ideology of Hindutva, does not hesitate to make context specific compromises. And Amit Shah has been saying this time and again that winnability is an important factor, and we adhere to this principle when we distribute tickets. Our public debate, interestingly, do not recognize the actual implication of this new form of politics. For instance, dominant section of liberal intellectuals adhere to the view that Hindutva politics is simply a form of fascism in India. They are not interested in studying the changing position of Sangh Parivar on caste system, the internal contradiction debate among the Hindutva group on economic liberalization, and even for that matter, the infamous UCC. This lack of engagement with changing political realities does not allow them to question their own assumption and belief. Now, this brings us to the third problem with our public life, public debates, and public life. There is no space for serious future oriented political imagination in our public discourses. The political parties have already started behaving like political firms. They address voters as consumers, offer welfare packages to attract them, and treat elections as competitive market. This election-centric framework is built upon two conflicting impulses: the desirability of the package for attracting a set of voters, and at the same time, the creation of an enemy or another who could be projected as a threat. UPA's politics of secularism and inclusion, for instance, envisaged the inclusion of marginalized group as a welfare package while projecting BJP's Hindutva as a threat to the nation. BJP, interestingly, also follow a similar logic. It talks of the Labharthis, beneficiaries, to reach out to the marginalized household. At the same time, Muslim identity is problematized to describe anti-BJP electoral politics as a form of minority appeasement. It shows that political parties do not need to invest in the idea of comprehensive social transformation. There is no such compulsion for intellectual class. They can certainly go beyond the limit set out by political parties. No doubt that Gandhi, Ambedkar, Bhagat Singh, Lohia, JP, Namboodiripad, Savarkar, Deendayal Upadhyay, Maulana Azad, and Jawaharlal Nehru are seriously discussed, debated, and criticized in public debates in recent years. This engagement with modern Indian political thought is very valuable. However, one also finds a strange over reliability on these figures, especially by the liberals. They are often evoked to find they are often evoked to find out the answer to contemporary questions. This reductionist approach is deeply problematic. The great thinker of the past can certainly be our reference point for making sense of our political realities. But we have to discover other intellectual resources as well to explore our political universe in its entirety. The book, which this is the book, is an attempt to make a meaningful academic intervention to address these complex questions of our public life. Now, I would like to discuss briefly about the title, which is in my view, is quite a provocative title, The History of the Present, especially when it is employed in relation to Muslims of India. It is a well-known fact that Islam is the second largest Indian religion and Muslims constitute 14% of India's population. This community of believers is highly diversified. They are divided on caste, class, region, and even religious life. To make any authoritative claim about the present of India's Muslim, hence, is a challenging task. Yet, I prefer to take up this challenge because of three very specific reasons. First of all, I make a crucial, and this is the theoretical premise which I'm presenting, which is a basic theoretical premise of the book, the argument which I make. I make a crucial distinction between substantive Muslimness and the discourse of Muslimness. Substantive Muslimness refers to the multiple ways in which Muslim identity is formed in a variety of regional and local contexts. Issues such as caste, language, class, and region play a significant role in determining the self-perception of a Muslim intellectual in real-life situation. Various survey-based studies conducted by CSDS Lokniti clearly shows that the Muslim perception, views, opinion, and attitudes do not follow any set pattern. Even we do not find any homogeneous response to the questions related to basic religious practices such as offering namaz and observing rosas in the month of Ramadan. This Muslim diversity underlines the fact that Indian Islam as a lived religion is practiced by Muslims in a variety of ways, and this is what I call substantive Muslimness. The discourse of Muslimness, however, underlines a different aspect of Indian Muslim identity. Classification of Muslim as a religious minority in purely statistical terms, the description of medieval Indian history as Islamic rule, and the media debates evolving around Islamic jihad and terrorism produce a simple and undifferentiated image of a homogeneous Muslim community. Every aspect of Muslim life is seen through the prism of this discourse, either to criticize Muslim for being barbaric or to celebrate Muslim culture as symbol of royal Islamic past. The interplay between substantive Muslimness and the discourse of Muslimness determine the actual manifestation of modern Indian Muslim identity in our public life. The substantive Muslimness gives its concrete real life meaning, while the discourse of Muslimness converts the Muslim identity into a national or global question. The title History of the Present, in my view, capture this interesting trajectory of Muslim identity, which this book tries to explore. Now, the second reason. The present of India's Muslim is always seen as a residue of their past, and precisely for this reason, we encounter a highly contentious representation of Muslim root and, for that matter, Muslim heritage. The distinction between past and history is relevant to elaborate this point. The past is a multifaceted phenomena, and modern history is one of the possible modes by which it is articulated and expressed. Memories, tales, and narratives are equally powerful techniques to explore the past. The given histories of Muslim presence in India are certainly an important aspect of Muslim imagination. However, their everydayness does not entirely depend on such history. We must therefore acknowledge the significance of the past in the everyday life situation of Muslim, and at the same time pay close attention to their highly diversified socio-cultural universe. In other words, we have to historicize the here and now of Muslims in India for the sake of producing a history of their present. And now the third reason, the triumph of Hindutva as dominant narrative of politics. Any discussion about Muslims of contemporary India cannot become meaningful if Hindutva as a political ideological force is not given adequate importance. However, the term Hindutva is often used freely. The BJP, and for that matter, the organization that recognize Hindutva as a way of life, employ this term in generic manner. Instead of defining Hindutva, they use it as a historical truth. Even many a time, they tend to go beyond V.D. Savarkar's conceptualization, who coined the term Hindutva. Interestingly, a section of liberal commentator does not pay attention to this important fact. They tend to evoke an old and almost outdated phrase, Sangh Parivar, to describe contemporary Hindutva as a form of fascism. This reductionist approach does not allow them to analyze the ever-changing constitution of Hindutva as a political force which has been accepted even by the non-BJP parties as a serious point of departure. The placing of Muslimness in this highly vague entity called Hindutva requires a serious engagement with contemporary political development. This is what makes the history of the present analytically meaningful. The book has, I asked three set of questions. These questions basically are of three kind: socioeconomic context and the nature of political class. I use the term political class intentionally to go beyond BJP versus rest equation. The second set of question is about Hindutva and the binary which is given to us between Hindutva and liberals. And finally, this book is all about Muslim responses. I ask question, are Muslim really anti-BJP and anti-Modi? What are their perception and anxieties? What has happened to Islam as a religion now? Has Hindutva discourse forced Muslim to becoming more Islamic? Have Muslim given up politics completely, etc.? To explore these three types of question, the book relies five kind of sources: official document, published material, speeches delivered by religious leaders and politicians, online sources, and finally data generated by CSDS Lok Niti. The structure of the book aims to provide a sequence to the question which I have identified. So there are basically 8 chapters in the book. The first chapter is about what I call more than a Muslim identity, and what is there any contradiction between the academic self of a researcher and his or her Muslim identity. The second chapter is about the idea of India, and it pays close attention to the political structure changes, etc., introduced by the BJP regime in post 2014 period. The third chapter discusses various ways in which Muslim past is reconfigured in New India. It touches upon Hinduism versus Hindutva debate to find out the constitution of Muslim historical in recent year. Fourth chapter is about Gyanvapi and the changing nature of Muslim heritage. The fifth chapter is about Muslim liberals, and the fifth chapter is about the contemporary Islamic religiosity. Sixth chapter is about liberal Islam. Seventh chapter is about Pasmanda Muslim question. And finally, eighth chapter is about political participation, where I evoke two concepts of participation: participation as interaction and participation as instrumental action. And finally, I make a few arguments in the final section. Uh, I think I stop here. Just one clarification about the book.
Hilal, you have good time. You can continue if you wish.
Okay.
We gave you 45, even 50 minutes. You reduce it to 35. It is all up to you. Okay.
Okay. So I'll
You
take
can
more 5 more minutes to
10 more minutes.
make a
10 more
few
minutes.
clarification. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Let me make three crucial clarification to underline the scope of the argument which I am making in this book. I must confess that the book is focused on North India. I do not claim to offer any analytically specific explanation of Muslim politics in southern state. Yet, I am confident that my analytical framework is certainly useful to make sense of the ways in which Muslim identity and politics it is intermingled at the state level. This modest claim is based on two premises. First, the contour of Muslim political discourse are always determined by the North Indian political development. The idioms, metaphor, and even the vocabulary of politics used in the northern state often transplanted at the state level. The love jihad and hijab are two crucial exceptions in this regard, where actually these two things came from south to north, but most of the time we use Muslim political discourse in the north to understand certain trajectories of Muslim politics. The second clarification is about that this study is interested in the big picture. The purpose of the book is to situate the Muslimness as a political entity in the larger political, cultural, and economic context. In this sense, it is not merely a study of Muslims in India. Instead, I take Muslimness as a vantage point to make sense of the multifaceted idea of Indian democracy. So therefore, I'm not actually trying to understand Muslim as if that something which is, Muslim responses are in a way should be seen as an end in itself. Rather, Muslim identity and Muslimness is actually a vantage point to understand the big picture of Indian democracy, which we have been witnessing since 2014. Finally, and this is the final clarification about the scope of the argument which I have made in this presentation as well in this book. There is no ready-to-use political recipe for future. The book does not offer or even claim to offer any political advice to any community or any political party or coalition. It is an intellectual exercise which aims to analyze political trends and attitudes. I think I should stop here, and because I want more discussion on these points so that we can, move to Professor Thakur, and then we'll have more discussion.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you very much.
And yeah, let's wait for Professor Thakur to do the concluding, and after that we move to question answers. Thank you. Ji Thakurji.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Hilal, for writing such a wonderful book. I think we have been thinking about this, that we should try to engage with the internal dynamics of these communities. Merely making political positioning won't work. So how do they engage with everyday life and everydayness of their politics? I will go section wise. I think your first section, personal is political, is a very well articulated point. And the example that you have given, I'm wondering if there is any serious psychoanalytical explanation of such kind of acts. I do not know what kind of mindset this man was, though I do agree with your point that this kind of hatred against communities has gone down. And this idea that Muslims are enemies, they got Pakistan and now they want to capture a section of India again, or all those stereotyping the discourse has gone down. And in everyday discussion in villages, you will find same points being repeated by people. Even in the areas where earlier, I think Hindu-Muslim relation was very coherent, very nice, like I belong to Simanchal, and that worries me. When I find that there is a system in Simanchal called Machan. Machan is an elevated platform where people come and sit and talk. So I did conduct a survey of Machans, and I discovered that number of Machans where both communities sitting together and talking has gone down in the last 20 years, 25 years. So this is something that we need to analyze, and the way the jihad has created multi-dimensions, the way it has, everything is now part of the jihad. Any action is part of the jihad. So that is very dangerous because the common people do not spend so much time in thinking. They just consume. They are also consumers of these ideas. And these consumers, like any other consumer of material goods, they do not ask questions. Whatever is prevalent, more acceptable, they just consume without arguing any question, raising any question. And that takes me to the second point about your intellectual politics. I think this is a very significant point. I remember that statement given by somebody. I always wonder why intellectuals should start speaking for some political parties. I think our duty is to explain what is happening. I'm not saying that we are not political. I think we are quite political, and we have ethical power to take decisions that we take. But that doesn't mean that the primary role of explaining the reality that we have to abandon in order to take a political posturing, political positioning. That I think you have, your answer is very, very interesting, and that takes me to the debate on the role of intellectuals in society. I think what went wrong in the public debate in last 70 years, probably intellectuals took up those positions which they thought would build the nation. And in order to do that, many of them did not speak the truth. They did not face the truth. I think we should have faced the truth. We should have talked about that. We should have discovered other means to resolve the crisis that we are facing. So only pushing under the carpet won't really help us. And I think the liberals are equally responsible for that, but they did not take religion seriously at all. They did not think that it was important to look at the anxieties people were facing, either side, and just declaring that this is a minority community permanently all over India, that, as you have rightly said, has further created problem for us. I'm not sure what you have in mind and how will you explain that point, that what is the consequence of that. So I would like you to elaborate on this little further. Is this good for the minority community as they got certain minority rights, or it reduced them to a permanent minority? As a consequence, uh, they were pushed out from political domain. Not that they are not voting, not that they are not getting elected, but the majoritarianism is such that, and winnability is such that instead of giving the merit or deciding the candidate according to merit, you decide according to the number. So as a consequence, for a good political leader, no chance is there to get a ticket. So that is the point that you are making about the political class. I think we have seen the decline of the political class in the last 70 years. Beyond a point, they have become shameless as they advocate things which they think is correct, and they build arguments to develop those things, those points, instead of really looking at the ethical dimension of it. So there are many politicians very argumentative, and I always said that every time they won the argument, they lost the confidence of people. So the kind of ethical power that the nationalist movements had, nationalist leaders had at that time during the freedom struggle, I think that ethical power is completely gone, and democracy as a political system does not invoke it. It does not invoke it. I mean, I can see in the constituencies, if you are a very good person and you don't have resources, nobody respects you. If you are a bad person, have a lot of resources, going with too many cars and buses, you are respected. So if you ask them who is going to win, the winnability is not decided by the person's merit as a good leader. It is decided by how much resources he has. So that is a problem with the political class. As a consequence, invariably, you can imagine that anybody who is winning an election has that kind of network, which is very much close to criminal network. I'm not generalizing it. I think there are many people who are good politicians and getting elected, but I'm saying that has become the norm today. Even getting tickets, that becomes a major thing. Another thing, I think the three problems you said, I would like you to emphasize a little more on the changing nature of capitalism. You have talked about the changing nature of the state. I think changing nature of capitalism is something that we must look at. I'm surprised in India, a capitalist is spending so much of money in the marriage as a vulgar dance, and still nobody is raising any question. In social media, you can see it is full of praise for this marriage. And what kind of argument is being built that this lady who was a dancer, I don't know who is she, but she said that India is a poor country, and then Ambani has paid 74 crores or 64 crores, I don't know what is the data, and she's dancing. And it's like any vulgar dance that is done on bars, in bars, and that is being celebrated on the ground that look at where India has reached, that it can hire you. So this vulgarity, I think earlier it was not possible. Public would have really protested. Now this is what we have reached to, and I don't see any serious comment by any political leader on this. I don't know what is the reason. No serious article being written that how money is being spent on these kind of things, and this is being given to the other country. I mean, this money goes outside. If you are advocating tourism inside so that your money can circulate inside your country, how can you promote this kind of hiring a dancer from outside? I mean, I'm not against entertainment. I'm sure that is very important, but also it is important to know what entertains you. And then the justification for this kind of expenditure. I think another point that you make very interesting, and I would like you to emphasize on this, the lack of future-oriented discourse. This is something very interesting. I think the discourse today has become past-oriented. It's less future oriented. And that takes me to this point that, well, probably Bhajapa's hegemony is not established. So every time it talks about past, it also talks about future, but the future is very bleak. It doesn't give clear picture what is the future going to give us. So that is where I think we need to look at the Hindutva and Muslimness and the history of the present, your sex on that. So what is Muslimness? I think this point is extremely interesting. Substantive Muslimness and discourse Muslimness. I would like you to emphasize the difference on this little further, and what is the importance of this distinction for political analysis, or is it also important for thinking of a radical politics on the ground of religion? Does that really give us some clue that a new political class having dream of transformative politics can deal with religion differently? Is that possible? I think you are right that when we say Hindutva is fascist, that is the laziness of Indian intellectuals. They do not want to look into, they neither want to look into the dynamics within Muslim community nor within the Hindutva. Hindutva has been very dynamic and there are internal tensions. So those tensions need to be analyzed. I think on the ground, probably, despite the fact that these episodes are there of one person killing with shouting some slogans, or killing people from one religion or other, on the ground, I still feel that Indian Muslims that you keep emphasizing and the Hindus do not have still such big contradictions that can allow the Hindutva party to have a permanent majoritarian politics. The majoritarian politics has its own limits, particularly when it is created in order to support a form of capitalism which is anti-people. So I guess you can emphasize a little bit on that, whether that works or not. On your method, I think you are making a very significant point that this data is an entry point to something. If you can give some examples that how CSDS data has given you entry point to analyze certain more, certain deeper questions, that would be really useful for us. I think, I mean, the sentence you use, instead of quantitative data comes to us as raw information. So it's a raw information. How do you deal with raw information? What kind of method do you need to implement beyond the raw information? What is the importance of the raw information? If you can emphasize a little bit on that, I will be really happy. Yeah, I think this debate related to Muslim heritage and the conflict that it produces in society. On that debate, what do you think about a position that historians have taken? Initially, they said that, well, this was not done. Then they agreed that it has been done. Don't you think it has really messed up the entire thing? I was thinking that if one could have made another position or taken another position that whatever was done in a different format of governance. Now we are living in a democratic society and we cannot go back to all such events and actions which we think would have discriminated people. I think there Hindutva's argument is very close to what the social justice people argue. Instead of really locating the history in the present, that how do we create a better society? How do we create more egalitarian society today? If you want to go back to the discriminations produced earlier, I'm not saying that earlier discriminations have no roots in present, but I'm only saying that earlier discriminations cannot be our big entry point to resolve the crisis in present times. So what is a new kind of argument that we need to develop? I have not read your comment on Gyanvapi, but maybe we can talk about that a little more. What is your position on that? I think I will just stop here. I have many questions, but I'm sure all questions will also come in the process. And I may come back if I feel like. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Thakur, and all the three speakers. Before we move on to question and answer session, this is the announcement for the upcoming Saturday talk. It is on and about Pakistan, and all the three speakers are from Pakistan. Professor Tariq Rahman is the main speaker, going to talk on Pakistan's wars and alternative history, and he will be joined by two very illustrious speakers and scholars, especially Raza Rumi, giving the concluding remarks. So, Faisal, our moderator today, Dr. Rafat Hussain, is not here. So, if you would like to take up this responsibility, I will be happy, or let me know, I can do that task, but I would like you to take up this task. Faisal, are you listening?
जी, okay.
जी, आप try करें, that will be nice. Thank you. And detail them how to raise the hand and all those things. Thank you.
Thank you for putting me on spot. I was planning for something else, but okay. Well, thank
Let
you
me
for
know
the
if you have
speakers for your
yeah.
lectures. The question and answer session is open. Let me open the ability to unmute yourself. Please raise your digital hand. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Some of them are very long. I don't know whether you want me to read Dr. Hilal and team, or you can. Let me take the first one from Muhammad Anas. Says, my question to Professor Hilal: how do you see Muslims of North Central India voting in upcoming general elections? And it's been happening in the past. Do you see Muslim consolidation leading to Hindu polarization in favor of BJP?
Can I, can I just take question one by one? What would you suggest? Because
Yes,
if there are
go
many,
ahead.
yeah. Because I would also like to. Professor Thakur has raised a few important issues. So what should we do? Should I respond to him first, or should I respond to the questions?
I mean, it's up to you, but my recommendation would be you pick one from the audience and one from the Dr. Thakur. That
I
would
think
be
yeah, that makes sense. First of all, about this. So, the first question is about how Muslims are going to vote in the coming Lok Sabha election. It's a difficult question to answer at the moment. But if you ask me about the previous trends of Muslim voting in, say, for instance, Madhya Pradesh and other parts of where the assembly election took place recently, you find obviously Muslims are not going to vote for BJP. That's certainly true. But they are not actually trying to vote in a way to defeat BJP. So we have to be very clear about one thing, that Muslim political participation is not as simple as we think, because we think that Muslim only participate in voting in order to defeat BJP, which is not true. Our surveys show that Muslims certainly do not vote to any political party. They vote at the constituency level. Obviously, there is something called, and every social group at the constituency level constitute itself in a constituency and vote in such a way that and especially in local elections, say for instance panchayat and in Vidhan Sabha, so their voting pattern would remain the same. But sometimes it seems that to think of consolidated pattern of Muslim voting in one particular political party is not true. So therefore, the point about future trends of Muslim, by the way, there is one important thing which we must remember. Nationally, according to our data since 2014, there is an interesting shift in Muslim support to BJP. Earlier, Muslim used to vote nationally 6% to BJP. it has changed. It is now between 8 to 9% nationally to BJP in Lok Sabha as well as in some of the state assembly elections. So
Hilal, is
therefore,
it any particular section of Muslims? Any particular category of Muslims voting for BJP? Sorry, I just...
Very interesting question, because you find that unlike the popular perception that actually the Pasmandas are going to vote in bloc to BJP, and this 9% is entirely from the lower caste, lower class Muslim, which is not true. In our data, we find, on the contrary, the upper caste as well as upper class, they moved quite significantly towards the BJP, and it explains that in order to consolidate their position in the emerging power structure, these communities would be more inclined to get the benefit coming out from the BJP dominated political structure. So therefore, as I said, that it is very difficult to say that what is going to happen. But obviously, these are the trends which we have observed in the past. Certainly, BJP is not the first choice for Muslims. Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to take the next question from Dr. Thakur?
Yes. There are many important questions which Professor Thakur has raised, and I'm glad that he read it very, very carefully, the text as well as what I presented today. Basically, I would like to start with his last question, because that is linked to the voting pattern question directly. When he asked this question about Muslim heritage, and we have to be very clear what really happened to Babri Masjid issue. There was a time in 1991 when a section of historians came out with a report called Historian's Report to the Nation. What is interesting is that this report was written very badly, and they did not, in my view, follow the standard protocol of writing history. It was a political pamphlet, and that pamphlet was presented to us as a serious historical research, which is not true. And that was the reason why, look at the people who were, opposing Hindutva legal fraternity, who was supporting Hindutva at that time in Babri Masjid issue. They did not do any homework. And as a result, in the final judgment of Babri Masjid, Supreme Court said that it is just an opinion. This is not a historical fact. So therefore, what Professor Thakur is saying makes sense, that we need to think of the idea of heritage, not merely as a historical question, but as a political question. And if we convert it into a political question, then the question would be, the answer he himself gives is that, do we really need to go back and settle scores? I don't think that could be the answer. Because in our survey, we find time and again that both Hindus and Muslims were not interested in Ram Temple Babri Masjid issue over the years. And you will be surprised to know that BJP did not contest election from Faizabad constituency in 1989. That was the time when Shilanyas took place. Many people did not know, because BJP was not confident enough to win election exactly at the site where Babri Masjid stood at one point of time. So therefore, and one more thing about the inauguration of Ram Temple. We have to make a distinction between people's perception. No secular leader went to people to tell that this is actually a disputed claim that Lord Ram was born here. On the other hand, BJP tried to propagate that this is the historical fact and the scientific fact, that this is the basic, this is actually the birthplace of Lord Ram. As a result, the generation that grew up after 1993, they did not know about what was happening in 1980s. They actually start believing that this is the historical place. So the enthusiasm of people for the inauguration ceremony of Ram Temple, in a way, shows the lethargic political attitude of non-BJP forces. So I'll come back to, Professor Thakur's question in this manner. So, but one point which I would like to link it to this point, because he asked a very, very important question about my method. I take survey data as a point of entry. And this is obviously because we do survey, and obviously when you go and you ask question, whatsoever a person who is doing the interview recorded does not entirely the opinion expressed by the respondent. So we have to be very clear about the complexities associated with this method. But at the same time, if you just look at the large picture, you have to rely on certain set of data. My methodology is that when I get these data, certain trends are clear to me. And in order to prove these trends, there is a further exploration. And this further exploration takes me into two directions. One, that one must have some kind of a coherent theoretical framework to place this in order to make sense of the raw material which is coming out from data one. And we also be very careful about making an argument on the basis of this. So that's why in my presentation I also pointed out that my argument are tentative. These are subject to certain methodological trajectory which I follow, and I'm not claiming that these are the ultimate answers. And the final point about the survey method is that personally I do. Basically looking, for instance, after conducting field research, after conducting surveys, I visited a few sites and tried to test the hypothesis that was coming out from the survey research. So that's the second level of engagement. One should not reduce everything to the survey, and this is the point which I am making. One must have a conceptual framework in order to place these things, and that's the reason why we have been trying to make sense of Muslim voting pattern over the years.
All right, thank you. So you have taken a question from chat. You've taken a question from Professor.
Yeah. Yes.
So can you
Yes.
take the question from? There's a raised hand. There's a hand
Dipankar
raised
sir.
by Dipankar. So Dipankar, go ahead and ask your question, please. Dipankar, you want to unmute yourself, please? All right, let me move on to the next question in the meantime while he's trying to unmute. The next question here was, while BJP is claiming that there was...
I'm back. I'm there. Sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Dipankar.
Yeah, Dipankar ji.
Dipankar ji, अपने सवाल पूछिए, please. Okay, let's move to this question here. While BJP is claiming that there is shivling in Ajmer Sharif Dargah and also involvement in Khadims of Ajmer Sharif 1992 case, at the same time, Modi is meeting with the Sufi spiritual leaders from Ajmer, Nizamuddin, and other places, and one Shia leader from Lucknow, but leaders from other sect of the Muslims were never asked for dialogue. Even there is a division in Sufi community of Ajmer too. Is there would be an impact of this meeting on Muslims?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a very important question. And if I add to Modi's recent visit to Kashmir, I think it makes a perfect sense that this question is very, very significant. Basically, you are asking the logic behind BJP's Muslim outreach. We have to, be very clear. If we look at the people who have voted for BJP, who these are, usually we think of voter as something which is one category, but this is not true. In our surveys, we find basically three types of BJP voters. One kind of BJP voters are the committed voters. So they would actually give vote to BJP candidate whosoever is the candidate. They would certainly go for him or her. The second category of voter who would give vote to BJP basically are those who would I describe as sympathizer. So these are not committed voters, but sympathizers. So they were with the other political parties. Now BJP is the dominant party. They have shifted towards the BJP. Now the third type of voter are the fluctuating voter. So they are not with any particular political party. Now, over the years, what we find, especially after 2019, in different elections that's a different assembly election, we find that BJP's core vote, the committed voter, is still with BJP. But in order to win election, you have to have support coming from these two segments, namely the sympathizer as well as those who are the fluctuating voters. Now, in order to approach these two segments, it is very important for BJP to present itself as an inclusive political party. And that has been the reason. Now, BJP, the success of BJP must be understood at two levels. One, BJP is the dominant political party in electoral terms. But BJP is also successful because Hindutva is the dominant narrative of Indian politics. So the moment other political party would go to meet Muslims or say anything about Muslim, they would say that they are doing a politics of appeasement. But their own outreach program is shown Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. So therefore, BJP is actually in an advantageous position. And they are fully aware of the fact that they are not going to get Muslim vote in such a way that their winning configuration is going to enlarge. So in order to retain their Hindutva constituency, they would like to keep them, the floating voter as well as sympathizer, in such a way to present the image of something which is a Muslim caring party, or not an inclusive party, but Muslim caring party. Now, this idea of care is very important in the imagination or the system which is produced by Modi regime. In my presentation, I have mentioned the point about the concept called Labharthi. Labharthi is not a jumla, it's actually a very serious term used by Niti Aayog to the beneficiaries. So the state, and I will link this question to Professor Thakur's comment on the crisis of capitalism later. But let me just elaborate this point about the idea of Labharthi. According to Niti Aayog, and the Prime Minister has spoken on this question time and again, that we do not discriminate while it comes to Labharthi. So who is Labharthi? Labharthi is a household which is given some kind of a benefit on one time, some kind of a benefit on the basis of one-time grant. So these, if you look at the welfare schemes that are there, you find that basically two types of welfare schemes are there. One, which are long-term, and second, which are short-term. In the long term, you have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. In the short term, you have ration distribution. So if in our survey we find that Muslims are certainly getting ration and all the benefit like Ujjwala. So these things are reaching out to Muslims. So in a way, the idea of care is expanded in such a way that the Hindutva constituency of voter remain intact. BJP could actually represent itself as an inclusive political party. And thirdly, the idea of Muslim homogeneity should be broken in such a way that Sufis, Pasmandas, and Shias, etc., these are the segments which are questioning the Ashraf hegemony of some kind. So therefore, therefore a particular kind of segment can be approached from the Muslim community. So it will actually a very interesting point. It is a very interesting configuration, which is created in such a way that the core vote of BJP remain intact, while at the same time the opposition political parties at the constituency level should not be in a position to say something about the fragmented nature of BJP's argument. So this is the reason why BJP has got a very interesting approach towards Muslim communities. Now, I would like to link up to the question which Professor Thakur has asked about the changing nature of capitalism. In my presentation, I just touched upon one thing that is called what is the nature of emerging Indian state. In my view, it is not a welfare state. It is a charitable state. Why it is a charitable state? Because A welfare state is a state where you have welfare as a right, but that welfare state is also contingent upon the formation of state which was there before 1991. In theory, not practice. In practice, Indian state was always a charitable state. But the nature has changed in 1991. In 1991, something interesting happened. That state decided to roll back from the economic activities in a very interesting way. Now, when the state started rolling back, a new conception was given to us. We were forced to believe that market is the best economic solution, capitalism, and market has got a tremendous capacity to regulate itself. This self-regulatory market economy was, there is a political consensus now. Every political party believes that we need not to touch upon the question of market. Instead, citizens are asked to, and that's the way. So the Modi government is trying to make a distinction between the economic life of people and the political life of people. In the economic life of people, it is argued that market will take care of everything. But in the political sphere of life of citizen, it is asked that we will give you benefit in such a way that you get empowered so that you can participate in the open market. And that's the reason why we do not find any solid, and because it's a dominant political consensus behind it, we do not find any serious engagement with the idea of political, the idea of the relationship between corporate world and the politics. And that's answer Professor Thakur's question, that, the wedding, which was, by the way, it was not wedding. It was pre-wedding celebration. Yeah, it was a pre-wedding something, which is entirely new concept. So this pre-wedding thing, why political class is reluctant to respond to that? Because there is a political consensus that market will regulate itself, and in the political sphere we have got committed citizen responsive government. Now that's the reason why the idea of charitable state become meaningful, and that idea of charitable state is used rather significantly to reach out to to Muslim beneficiary in a very interesting way, so that the configuration of voter at the constituency level remain intact.
Thank you. So there's a rather long question here. I'll probably try to cut in short, and then after that, Razibhai, I'll hand it over to you. I had to step away. Is it appropriate to utilize the Pasmanda category to subsume all the Muslim subalterns? Is there any scope to import the category of Mahadalit and view of the community of Muslim Pasmandas and add the category of Mahapasmanda? And then it goes on why there is a general tendency to reduce the political participation of Muslims at state, legislative, and parliamentary levels, although in terms of decision-making power centers, nobody can question their centrality.
It is actually a comment, not a question, and I partly agree with the comment, because what is the significance of Pasmanda as a category? Pasmanda, what is Pasmanda? Pasmanda is a category given to us by Ali Anwar Ansari, and he is using in a secular sense. He is not using it as a very specific Islamic sense. His point is simple, that there are class-based distinction, diversity and heterogeneity of Muslim in such a way that we can identify the most backward communities among Muslims. So there is no one homogeneous Muslim community. Muslim community is divided on caste and class line, and therefore we must, in order to address them, we need to evoke the concept of Pasmanda. But when you say that, you have to be very clear what is the nature of Pasmanda discourse. Pasmanda discourse has got three elements, and we have to be very clear about these three things. Quite often we mixed all these three, and that's why confusion, it creates a lot of confusion. The first aspect of Pasmanda politics is that they are making a point that Muslim community is not Homogeneous, it means that they are questioning the sociological basis by which we think of religious communities in India. That's a very valid point. Sociologically, Muslims are divided in caste, and caste is a reality. That's one. Second is that, which is more important than the first, the second aspect of Pasmanda discourse is about the legal constitutional framework that is given to us. We all know that there are three types of reservation in India for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes. Interestingly, scheduled caste is actually not a secular category. You cannot get benefit, you cannot be included in the scheduled caste list until and unless you are either a Hindu or a Sikh or a Buddhist. So there is no reservation for scheduled caste category for Muslims and Christians. So that's a very different from the first thing, that Muslims are obviously caste divided. Second is that the category called scheduled caste is not entirely secular. Therefore, the Pasmanda question is about opening the scope of affirmative action in such a way that Muslim and Christian, Dalit could be included in SC list. And the third aspect of Pasmanda discourse is about politics. And that's the reason why, you know, there is a very powerful claim by Pasmanda groups that Pasmanda question is not a communal question. It is a secular question. So they have a very interesting slogan that Dalit Pichda Ek Saman Hindu ho ya Musalman, meaning backward of all kinds should come together. There is no need to evoke religion in it. So these three things must be separated from each other in order to make Pasmanda thing more significant. Now, if you allow me to link it to one of the questions which Professor Thakur has raised about the lack of future-oriented discourse. And this is something which reminds me the significance of Pasmanda discourse. Because Pasmanda discourse is not about changing, it is making a very interesting, this is something what Ambedkar also says in his Annihilation of Caste. He says that religion should be divided into two. One is religion of principle and second is religion of rules. And Pasmanda groups are doing exactly the same thing. So it's a future-oriented discourse in a very interesting way. And in the book, I have tried to touch upon the question of marginalization, and it has got a tremendous potential for radical politics. Because if we just think of the question of caste and class, by the way, it is also sensitive towards the question of class. It is not a casteism of something. It is actually deeply rooted in the discourse of class, the economic backwardness of these communities. So therefore, there is a lot of potential, radical potential in these things. These are future-oriented things, and that's the reason why I conclude my book by evoking a film scene from, there is a very famous film called Garam Hawa. And I like the last scene. For me, the main protagonist is not a hero. The person who has lost everything, Ballad Sani, in the aftermath of partition, he is not a hero for me. But his son decided not to go to Pakistan. Instead, there is a procession going on. And this person actually gets into the procession. So the answer that is given to us is this, that if we keep continuing evoking only one-dimensional Muslim identity, we won't be able to think of larger transformative politics of religion. And this is what my answer is, that in order to, Muslim participate in politics without giving up their Muslim identity. And we have to just look at the ways in which they participate in different forms of politics in order to find out the radical potential of religion, which is obviously, Pasmanda is a great example of that intervention.
Okay, so now I'm taking over. Faisal has to step out for some reason. There is one Narendra Yadav ji. Please go ahead and raise your question. And be very brief. And I think the response also should be brief so that we can cover other questions. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Hilal Ahmed, for this book. I have not read, but I'll try to read it after this. So I have two questions. One is that as we are seeing every caste and community is asking for their share in politics in this elections, and they are bargaining. But when it comes to the Muslims, they do not have a major political party that can bargain on their behalf. So, and the second is where, whoever Muslims are voting, they do not have a strong will to announce. Like these political party, they do not have a strong will to announce their a kind of policy and programs for the Muslims, and even hardly any major political parties in India bloc have a strong stand against the communal politics of the BJP. So how you are looking this how you are looking this like phenomena, or how this, so how it failed to include Muslims in this political scenario, or what do you think on it? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Narendra Bhai, for your question. First of all, the book has not yet been out. It is going to be out in July or August 2024. So this is the first kind of a presentation of the main argument that is there in the book. Coming back to your question, that first of all, we have to make a distinction between political parties and Muslims. So we think that question is coming out from the dominant discourse. Now the election is going to announce, and I know that how many phone calls are going to come to me and people like me who are doing work on Muslim politics, that they would ask us to respond how Muslims are going to behave, how political parties are going to give. But I do not want to give a very straightforward answer to you. This is, by the way, it's an important question. I'm not denying the significance of this question. But when we say Muslim, we are talking about 14% of India's population. It's a huge population. And no one has got any methodology to claim that how do these large group of people are going to behave. So therefore, we have to be very careful. One. Second is, when it comes to, and that's an important point which you raised, that how should we look at the attitude of political parties towards Muslim, or for that matter any other social group. See, political parties are governed by a different logic of election. They participate in election not for making social change. Things have changed. Now political parties are professional entities. They participate in election in such a way to maximize their interest, and in order to do so, they would approach different set of people according to the winnability configuration they have. And that's the reason why, and I'll give you this example and then I'll stop. For example, what is the political position of of all non-BJP parties on the question of Gyan Mati? Nothing. It means that the dominant, because their logic is governed by the idea of winnability and the dominant narrative of politics that is played out. So they draw their vocabulary from the dominant narrative, and Hindutva is a dominant narrative. So therefore, it would become very difficult for them to make an argument which goes against the dominant politics, because they have to rely on certain template of politics which is there and which is prevalent. So we have to understand the logic, and that's why I differ from, say, for instance, Jayaprakash Narayan. Jayaprakash Narayan's politics of total revolution and his support for a particular party, Janata Party, they are two different things. So the moment you get into a formation of a political party which is going to contest election, the logic of your argument change, and you will rely entirely on the mechanism that is given to you, that is election, in order to respond to the questions that are coming to you. But if you go out from the fray of electoral politics, you are free to think. And that's the point which I made. And this is what link it to Professor Thakur's comment, that the moment you get out from the electoral game, you are free to think of different ideas and future orientation. So we have to be very clear about these two things.
Okay, so Hilal, let me read two questions, and
Yeah.
both are somehow related, although from the opposite end, and then you can respond. And after that, I'll come to one raised hand. And so these questions came earlier. And by the way, today probably is International Women's Day, and so we should all acknowledge and appreciate for the day. And so the question comes from a woman or a girl, Ifat Khatun. Has written, how do you see BJP's attempt to de-Islamization of India through various ways like Babri, hijab, mob lynching, which doesn't target Muslims as heterogeneously, but Muslims as a one community? And then she extends the question that also at present regime has targeted Muslims in academia by stopping MANF and recently by closing Maulana Azad Education Foundation. This is one issue on the Muslim, grievances and things. And then there is the Pankar, I think Sagar Prasad writes, hello, Hilal sir, I'm interested in gaining a deeper understanding of the distinctions between Hinduism and Hindutva. From your perspective, could you please share your insight on the key differences between these two concepts? So you can blend the two questions if you can, and do it briefly so that we can move on.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Ifat, for this is a wonderful question. Both the questions are wonderful. De-Islamization of India. Now, I think we have to be very clear about one thing, that the success of BJP is not, as I said in one of the responses, that success of BJP should not entirely be understood as an electoral success. BJP is the dominant force, hegemonic force at the moment, and it is also concerned about to maintain that hegemony. So this is the argument which Suhas Palshikar often makes, that BJP's hegemony is also an important serious question for them. Now, in order to win election is a one thing, but in order to create an environment in which you continue to win is a different thing. So therefore, when the question of sustaining or creating an environment comes, and BJP, because BJP is the dominant political force and hegemonic force as well, and as well as is the ruling political party, it becomes inevitable for BJP to create something like this. And it is useful because BJP has also so successful in creating a constituency of voter which we may call Hindutva constituency of voter. Now, in order to appease this Hindutva constituency of voter, they have to evoke continuously anti-Muslimism. But at the same time, as I said, that there is this different segment of voter as well, the sympathizer as well as the fluctuating voter. In order to address the requirement of these two segments, BJP would do something called Muslim outreach. So it's a very interesting configuration. So de-Islamization is a part and parcel of to create an environment in which the dominant consensus, national consensus, which was still not in favor of, which was still in favor of accommodating Muslim presence in a significant way, was there. So BJP is destabilizing that in such a way that this destabilized new conception could actually create an environment in which BJP could continue to win even after Mr. Narendra Modi. So this is the logic behind this whole debate on questioning everything now, but it is not as simple as we think. It's a complicated question. Why it is complicated? Now I'll take you back to, say, in 1950s. And this is the same question that emerged in front of the Pakistan government. When India and Pakistan divided, and this is precisely the question with regard to, say, for instance, Gyanvapi debate and Babri Masjid debate. when India and Pakistan was divided, they were divided very strangely. Very strangely is that on the one hand, Indian leaders were deeply invested in the idea of ancient India. And Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were actually there in Karachi, so they were part of Pakistan. While on the other hand, the two-nation theory of Jinnah was based primarily on the question of separation between Hinduism and, historically, Hinduism and Islam. And almost all the significant historical monuments were in this side of the of subcontinent. So therefore, India, now Nehru was an intelligent person. He was able to create an argument in which Hindu, ancient India, medieval India, and even the British India could be accommodated in the national consensus. But it became very serious question for Pakistan. Similarly, at the moment, BJP is facing a serious intellectual challenge. How to accommodate, say, for instance, Taj Mahal. Look at what Yogi Adityanath had to say about Taj Mahal 3 years back. Or how to accommodate, for instance, Jama Masjid. How to even accommodate Gyanvapi or Mathura. So you cannot actually get rid of Muslim presence in its entirety in order to present de-Islamized India in a way which is understandable. So look at the construction of history in Pakistan and look at the problem facing BJP at the moment. So therefore, I think we need to be very clear about de-Islamization. The second question is, which is related to this question, Hinduism and Hindutva debate. I evoke this because there are many public intellectuals like Shashi Tharoor and Pawan Verma who have written books, and even Mr. Salman Khurshid. They have written, they are making an interesting argument that we have to make a distinction between Hinduism and Hindutva. Hindutva is something which is a perverted form of Hinduism. Hinduism is good, Hindutva is bad, etc. But I read these books very carefully, and I find that the rigorousness which we find in Gandhi is completely missing. Now, Gandhi's Hinduism is an open religion. It is not a closed religion. The recent debate on Hindutva and Hinduism is actually trying to use the framework offered to us by Hindutva. Hindutva envisage Hinduism, Hindu religion, in such a way that it would eventually become an Abrahamic religion. And this is exactly what the opponent of Hindutva are doing. They are also presenting Hinduism in such a way that it would become a kind of a answer to Hindutva. See, Gandhi's Hinduism is not answer to Savarkar's Hindutva. Gandhi's Hinduism was flexible and open. And that's the problem at the moment, which we find the critique of Hindutva, because these critique of Hindutva are, in my view, rather poor. I would like to link up to the comment made by Professor Thakur about the intellectual, the role of religion. And that's why, Pratap Bhanu Mehta wrote an excellent article. There is an assumption that Hinduism is a discovery of 19th century colonialism. I think we need to get rid of that. And Pratap Bhanu Mehta was critical of that assumption. And I completely agree with him that we need to think of the historical continuity which is there. And this historical continuity was constituted in such a way that new ideas, new religious ideas actually continue to come and amalgamated, interestingly, in the land which we called India now. So therefore, there is a need to recognize that diversity in its entirety.
So Hilal, now can you read some of the questions yourself, or you want me to selectively put
it
something?
it would be great if you.
Yes, I can do that.
Because
I can do that.
otherwise,
And also, if you just let me know if you get tired, because usually we go up to 1 or 12:50. So you have another 10 for 12 minutes, and then let's wind it up. That's good enough. So many questions were raised. There is one Binish Mariam, and this also I read at other places, that the communal Hindutva politics is conceptualized by the upper strata of Hindus to legitimize their idea of social order and religion. how does this philosophy become popular amongst the OBCs and the lower caste Hindus? And so this also really puzzles many secularists and others, that how they were so effectively manipulated, like by Hindutva politics, that a lot of went for them. So is that really, do they believe, or they temporarily got into it? Please go ahead.
Very good question. Thank you, Vineet. Yeah, thank you very much. It's a wonderful question. Basically, I think we have to understand one thing, that when we say Sangh Parivar is actually, it's a very interesting concept. It is coined rather accidentally, but it is a very significant concept. And we have to look at the configuration of Sangh Parivar in its entirety. Say, for instance, BJP. BJP is a political party. BJP is a political party which is governed by the norms and rules determined by Election Commission of India. Now there is a entity which is called Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh is a network. It would be completely wrong to think of it as an organization. It is a network. And third is an organization like, for instance, Bajrang Dal, Vishwa Hindu Parishad, etc. These are registered organization, and in a way they are NGOs. So therefore, we are basically three set of things: political party, network, and registered NGO. Now, there is a very interesting division of labor among them, and that answers the question which Binish is asking. Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, because it is a network and it has actually played a very significant role in reaching out to, and that's the point which I also made in my presentation, that it would be completely wrong to think that whatsoever written by Savarkar or even Golbarkar was still relevant for the politics of BJP and, for that matter, RSS. Things have changed. Abhay Dubey has a very interesting book. It's called Hindu Ekta Banam Gyan Ki Rajniti. It's a wonderful book, and everybody should read that book, in which he shows, and then our friend Kamal Nayan Chaube, whose book is going to come out now. It is on Vanvasi Kalyanashram. These work shows that RSS as a network did not stop. It reached out. It also makes certain interesting changes in its own formation. But it also reached out, and that's why in Abhay Dubey's book, there is a very interesting concept of Shakha. Now, Shakha, Golwarkar, and then even Devras, they were not interested in actually getting rid of, say, for instance, caste. They said caste is an important thing and we have to make this cut. And this is the argument Abhay Dubey makes in his book. Shakha is a place you have to come and get rid of your caste even for an hour or so in the morning. So it is not complete, getting rid of caste, etc. But in a way to bring different set of people together. Now, when you bring these different set of people, you create some kind of a dialogue. And that dialogue played a significant role at the second level. The second level was, and this is what Badri Narayan's work shows, that RSS tried to reach out to non-Jatav communities in UP. And when they reach out to these communities, their Devata, deities, were included in the Hindu fold in such a way that they would be celebrated as the part and parcel of BJP's, RSS's imagination of Hindu unity. So therefore, for 20, 30 years, they continue to work among non-dominant Dalit forces in tribals, etc., even in Northeast. So that social intervention played a very significant role in the transformation of political attitude of these communities. In our survey, we find that scheduled caste communities and scheduled tribe communities significantly vote in favor of BJP in the areas where they used to vote I was making in my presentation and in the book, that there is a failure. Because if you look at the non-BJP parties, even the left parties, you do not find a support system in the socialist sphere. So all political parties are participating only in the realm of the political. BJP is the only political party which has got an advantage to actually intervene in the social realm and intervene effectively.
Okay, so there is a one hand raised, Dr.
Yeah,
Abdul
Razibhai,
Jabbar, and probably his question will be very interesting because he comes from extreme end of Tamil Nadu and also from the state where Hindutva is almost zero. So probably it's a different experience. Dr. Abdul Jabbar.
Yeah, thank you for the
Be,
introduction.
be brief.
Yes, I think, can you unmute my video? I want to show my face.
1 second.
So while you're doing that, a fantastic discussion. I think I was kind of intrigued by both you and Dr. Thakur. In terms of the secular intellectuals apparently fail to recognize the importance of societal dynamics. So clearly, elitist kind of outlook on their thinking must have created a space, larger space for Modi, BJP, whatever the people who are really clever about exploitation. So I think this is not very new. Even in the US, we have the same dynamics playing out in terms of the populism. It's a different dynamics in a white versus non kind of thing. So I think somebody came in about 8 years ago, exploited the difference. So I think, do you see parallels in these two democracies? That is I wanted to have your thought on that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Jabbar Saab. Thank you very much for your question. And it's a very interesting question. We often compare democracies, and there is a lot of methodological innovation over the years that we create different indexes, etc., in types of democracy in various parts of the world. And initially, we were very critical of that. But then these comparisons are significant. Now, my position on, say, for instance, Indian democracy is this, that there is a very interesting debate. There is a video which came out a few days ago, I think 2 weeks ago, by Dhruv Rathi. And this video became an instant success. And this person was, I think, not in India. And he made this point, and very provocative point, that there is a tendency of dictatorship emerging in India. And this is the argument he makes. Now, Yogendra Yadav, he answers that in a very interesting way. He says that it is right that Indian democracy is facing a tremendous crisis, but the idea of dictatorship is a problematic idea. Because, before this discussion, we had a very interesting chat with Professor Thakur and Razibhai about are they going to continue with election, etc. And our response was that yes, elections are going to be an important aspect for them to legitimize their authority. By the way, when we think of India, India is a huge country. So what Yogendra Yadav's argument was, it is an interesting argument. He says that India is not going to be a dictatorship, but rather he uses the term authoritarianism. Authoritarianism, democratic authoritarianism. There would be an element of democracy, but these elements of democracy would actually channelize in such a way that the authoritarianism could be achieved. And this is what we have been experiencing at the moment. My argument, my position is slightly different. And this is what Professor Thakur also indicated. We have been arguing that in order to understand the dynamics of democracy, we need to make a distinction between political democracy and economic disparity. Until and unless we look at the idea of political democracy in relation to the economic disparity in the country like India, we won't be able to understand the political sphere. So the relationship between politics and economy are crucial and important. And that's why the nature of state, which I describe as charitable state, I just respond to one of the questions that what kind of state we have. So in order to understand the nature of democracy, at the moment, we have to understand the nature of Indian state and the political economy of Indian state. And that's why the idea of charitable state, the ideas of Labharthi, these are important constraint in order to make sense of the world in which we live and which we call democratic.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess
Thank
the
you.
last question, because we don't have any time left, is one that hand was raised earlier. Miss Sona Khan, probably she's still here. Sona Khan, please. I do not know. Anyway, so let's end it here. So thank you all very much. And Hilal, you must be very tired. You have really responded so much in detail. It is 2 hours all done. Very well, very engaging session. We have learned a lot. And Manindra ji, I mean, do you want to say anything? Or Dhananjay sir? I mean, you can briefly make a comment or raise a question, but I mean, it is already quite late for India. If you wish to say anything, please feel free.
No. I think we are done. And
looking forward to reading the book. Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to reading the book.
That is very good. So
But
thank you all.
What is the name of the book? Because I missed it.
Yes,
What
you
is
must
the name
leave.
of the book?
No, the book is the title of the presentation. The history of the
I
present.
see. Okay. Oh, I got it. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So thank you all very much and hope to see you again and again and again. It was really very, very engaging session and presented very well. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Lal.
Thank you very much.